Billionaire CEO vowed never to love again, until her presence made his heart full for the first time. The invitation sat on his desk for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of avoiding the one place that might remind him he was still alive. Colton Hicks had made a vow 5 years ago at a gravestone, never to love again. He'd kept that promise every single day since. Until the night he saw her. The woman in the emerald dress who would make him break every rule he'd built to protect his shattered heart. This is their story. Welcome back to Tales of the Heart, where we bring you emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul. If you're just joining us for the first time, you're welcome to this wonderful big family. We're so glad to have you here. Please make sure to watch till the end, and if today's story moves you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and share this video with your family and loved ones. Now, let's dive into today's story. The invitation sat on Colton Hicks's desk for 3 weeks before Garrett finally walked into his office and slapped a hand down on it. You're going. Colton, 37 years old and worth more than most small countries, didn't look up from his laptop. March 2024 had been brutal for acquisitions, and he had a board meeting in 2 hours. No. It's your company's name on the sponsorship. Hicks Global Enterprises donated $250,000 to this arts nonprofit. The least you can do is show your face for an hour. Garrett Langford had been his best friend since college and his COO for the last 6 years. He was also the only person on earth who could walk into Colton's office unannounced and live to tell about it. Send someone else. You go. Colton. Garrett's voice shifted, less business partner, more concerned friend. You haven't been to a social event in 8 months. You barely leave this building. You're turning into a ghost. I'm busy. You're hiding. Colton's fingers stopped moving across the keyboard. The silence in the corner office stretched long enough that the air conditioning cycling on sounded loud. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Charleston's historic district spread out beneath them, all church steeples and harbor views and buildings older than the country itself. He'd bought this building 4 years ago. Renovated it. Never once walked the streets below to enjoy what he'd invested in. Friday night, Garrett said quietly. 7 o'clock. Middleton Place. I'll pick you up at 6:30. I can drive myself. So you're going? Colton finally looked up. Garrett was 38, graying at the temples, and wore the expression of someone who'd watched his best friend slowly disappear for 5 years and was tired of it. Since May 2019. Since the night Victoria's car slid on rain-slicked asphalt and hit a concrete barrier at 60 miles an hour. Since the night Colton became a man who made vows at gravestones. I'll never love anyone else. I promise. 1 hour, Colton said. 2. There's a program. You're presenting the check. Garrett. 2 hours. You'll survive. His friend headed for the door, then paused. And Colton? We're something other than black. Try gray. Maybe even navy if you're feeling adventurous. The door closed before Colton could tell him where to shove his color commentary. He looked back at the invitation. Brush and Soul Annual Fundraiser Gala, celebrating young artists, building bright futures. Some nonprofit that taught art to underprivileged kids. His company donated to hundreds of organizations every year. Tax write-offs and good PR. He signed the checks. Other people showed up and smiled for the cameras. Colton pulled open his desk drawer. Inside, beneath quarterly reports and acquisition contracts, was a small velvet box he hadn't opened in 5 years. Next to it, a photo he looked at too often and not often enough, Victoria, laughing at something he'd said, her hand reaching toward the camera to push it away. He closed the drawer. 1 hour. He could survive 1 hour. Frances Harper stood in front of her bathroom mirror on Friday evening and tried to remember the last time she'd worn heels. Mama, I don't know about this dress, she said aloud to the empty apartment. Talking to her mother had been a habit for 34 years when she was alive, and 3 years after her death, Frances still couldn't break it. Didn't want to. It's too fancy, right? I look like I'm trying too hard. The dress was deep emerald green, fitted at the waist, flowing at the knees. Nadine Wells, her mentor and the closest thing she had to family in Charleston, had taken her shopping last week and refused to let Frances leave the store without it. Baby, you founded this organization, Nadine had said, 72 years young and fierce as hurricane wind. You've spent 3 years building it from nothing. Tonight, you get to celebrate that. Wear the damn dress. So Frances wore the damn dress. Her phone buzzed. A text from her younger sister Sienna in Atlanta, you better send pictures. And if any rich men ask you out, get a background check first. Love you. Frances smiled. Sienna was 29 and protective in ways that would be annoying if they weren't so rooted in love. They'd lost their father when Frances was 12 and Sienna was 7, heart attack, sudden, devastating. Then Mama in September 2021 to cancer that came fast and took her faster. The Harper sisters had learned early that love was temporary and precious and worth protecting. Frances slipped on her heels, grabbed her clutch, and took one last look around her small apartment. It was nothing fancy, a one-bedroom in a converted historic building on the peninsula, but she'd painted every wall herself. Warm yellow in the kitchen. Soft coral in the bedroom. The living room was gallery wall chaos, her own paintings, her students' work, photos of Mama, sketches and dreams and color everywhere. This was home. Small and imperfect and entirely hers. Her phone buzzed again. Nadine, cars outside. Let's go show these people what Brush and Soul is really about. Frances locked the door and headed down. Tonight, her little non-profit, the organization she'd built to honor Mama's belief that every child deserved beauty and creativity in their lives, was receiving a $250,000 grant from some tech billionaire's company. It would fund 3 new program sites, hire 2 full-time teaching artists, and provide supplies for 200 more kids. She'd prepared a speech. Practiced it 40 times in her living room. She just had to get through tonight without tripping in these heels or crying when she thanked everyone for believing in the work. Easy. Middleton Place looked like something out of a fairy tale. Frances had been to the historic plantation and gardens once before, but never like this, never at twilight with hundreds of string lights turning the old oak trees into something magical, never with a jazz quartet playing near the reflection pool, never with Charleston's elite wandering the grounds in designer suits and cocktail dresses. "Stop looking so nervous," Nadine murmured beside her. She wore royal purple and statement jewelry and carried herself like the retired principal she was, someone who'd spent 40 years refusing to take anyone's nonsense. "I'm not nervous." "Baby, you're gripping that clutch so hard you're gonna break the clasp." Frances forced her fingers to relax. Around them, people mingled and laughed, servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, and everything felt surreal. 3 years ago, Brush and Soul had been an idea she'd sketched on napkins while sitting beside Mama's hospital bed. A way to process grief. A way to make meaning out of loss. Now it was this. "There's the Hicks Global people," Nadine said, nodding toward a cluster of executives near the main house. "You ready? Do I have a choice?" "Nope." They made their way through the crowd. Frances smiled and shook hands and thanked people whose names she'd forget by tomorrow. The executive team from Hicks Global was professional and complimentary, talking about community impact and strategic philanthropy and other phrases that sounded like they came from a handbook. "Mr. Hicks sends his apologies," one of them said. "He's running a few minutes behind. Flight delay." Frances nodded like that meant something to her. She had no idea what the CEO even looked like. Probably some older white man in an expensive suit who'd write the check and leave. That was fine. She didn't need a friend. She needed funding. The program started at 7:30. Frances's students, 12 kids from her after-school program, ages 8 to 14, stood on a small stage and talked about what art meant to them. Jayla, 10 years old with braids her grandmother spent 2 hours perfecting, said art made her feel like she mattered. Marcus, 13 and usually too cool to show emotion, said painting was the only time his brain got quiet. Frances stood to the side and wiped her eyes as discreetly as possible. This was why she did it. When the kids finished, the executive from Hicks Global took the microphone and started talking about corporate responsibility and community investment. Frances's mind drifted. She scanned the crowd, looking for Nadine, and that's when she saw him. He stood near the back, partially hidden by one of the massive oak trees. Tall, easily over 6 feet. Dark suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Light brown hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it too many times. And even from 30 feet away, even in the fading twilight, she could see the way he was looking at her students. Not polite interest. Not obligation. Something that looked almost like pain. And now, the executive was saying, "I'd like to invite Mr. Colton Hicks, founder and CEO of Hicks Global Enterprises, to present the grant to Brush and Soul's incredible founder, Frances Harper." The man by the oak tree went completely still. Then he moved forward, and Frances forgot how to breathe. He wasn't old. He was maybe late 30s, and handsome in a way that felt almost unfair, sharp jawline, gray-blue eyes, presence that made people shift and turn without him saying a word. But it was his expression that caught her. Carefully blank. Controlled. Like he was holding something massive behind a dam that might break any second. He climbed the steps to the small stage. The executive handed him an oversized ceremonial check. The real one was already deposited, but this was for the photos. Colton Hicks took it without smiling. Frances walked forward. Their eyes met. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe. Or recognition, though they'd never met. His gaze dropped briefly to her dress, back to her face, and for just a second, she saw the dam crack. Then it was gone. Professional mask back in place. "Miss Harper," he said, extending his hand. His voice was deep, controlled. "Congratulations on the incredible work you're doing." She took his hand. His grip was firm, warm. Mr. Hicks. Thank you. This funding will change lives. I hope so. They stood there, hands clasped, cameras flashing around them. The moment stretched 1 second too long. His thumb brushed, probably accidentally, against her wrist where her pulse was hammering. He let go first. Would you like to say a few words? The executive asked him. No. Colton's response was immediate. Then, seeming to remember himself, he added, Miss Harper should speak. This is her achievement. He stepped back, yielding the microphone, and Frances tried to remember her prepared speech. All those practiced lines about gratitude and community and opportunity. But when she looked out at the crowd, at her students beaming in the front row, at Nadine wiping proud tears, at this beautiful setting and impossible moment, the script evaporated. My mama used to say that art isn't a luxury, she began. It's breathing. It's how we process a world that doesn't always make sense. How we find beauty in hard places. How we remember we're human. Her voice caught. She passed 3 years ago, and I started Brush and Soul because I needed to remember how to breathe again. These kids, she gestured to her students, they remind me every single day that creating something beautiful is an act of hope. And hope is everything. The crowd applauded. Frances saw Nadine outright crying now, and Jayla giving her a thumbs up, and several board members dabbing their eyes. When she glanced to her right, Colton Hicks was staring at her like she'd just spoken in a language he'd forgotten he knew. His hand had moved to his chest, fingers pressed against his sternum, over his heart, like he was checking to make sure it was still there. Their eyes met again. This time, neither of them looked away. Welcome back to Tales of the Heart, where we bring you emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul. If you're just joining us for the first time, you're welcome to this wonderful big family. We're so glad to have you here. Please make sure to watch till the end, and if today's story moves you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and share this video with your family and loved ones. Now, let's continue. Colton left the gala after 45 minutes. He'd stayed long enough to present the check, shake the necessary hands, and exchange business cards with board members who wanted follow-up meetings. Professional obligations fulfilled. Then he'd walked to his car, climbed in, and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes with the engine off. His hand kept moving to his chest, to the chain under his shirt, to Victoria's engagement ring he'd worn against his heart for 5 years. It felt heavier than usual. My mama used to say that art isn't a luxury. It's breathing. Frances Harper's voice kept playing in his head. The way she'd looked standing on that stage, not polished or rehearsed, just real. Genuine. The emerald dress had been beautiful, yes, but it was her face that had stopped him. The naked emotion when she talked about her mother. The pride when she looked at those kids. The way her whole being seemed to radiate warmth. He hadn't felt warm in 5 years. Colton finally started the car and drove back to his penthouse overlooking Charleston Harbor. 1,500 square feet of minimalist perfection, all clean lines and neutral colors and nothing personal anywhere. He poured 2 fingers of scotch he wouldn't drink and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows watching container ships move through the dark water. His phone buzzed. Garrett, you stayed 45 minutes. That's 15 minutes longer than I expected. Progress. Then, also, I saw you watching her. Want to talk about it? Colton set the phone down without responding. He didn't want to talk about the way Frances Harper's smile had made his chest ache. How when she'd touched his hand for that photo, he'd felt something other than numb for the first time since 2019. How he'd left because staying felt dangerous, like standing too close to something that could burn him alive. He'd made a vow. He intended to keep it. 2 weeks later, March 30th, 2024. Frances sat in Common Ground Coffee on King Street, reviewing grant reports on her laptop, when someone slid into the chair across from her. She looked up, ready to politely tell whoever it was that the seat was taken, and found herself staring at Colton Hicks. He looked different than he had at the gala. Still impeccably dressed, but the suit was charcoal gray instead of black, and he'd lost the tie. His hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. And his eyes, those gray-blue eyes that had looked so carefully controlled 2 weeks ago, now held something that looked almost uncertain. Mr. Hicks, Frances said, recovering. This is a surprise. Colton, please. He glanced at her laptop, the scattered papers. I'm interrupting. I'm sorry. I can. No, it's fine. Just quarterly reports. She closed the laptop, suddenly very aware that she was wearing leggings and an oversized Howard University sweatshirt, her alma mater, with paint stains on the sleeve. Her natural hair was pulled up in a messy bun. No makeup. This was Saturday morning working Frances, not gala-ready Frances. What brings you to this part of town? You, actually. Her heart did something complicated. Colton seemed to realize how that sounded. I mean, I wanted to follow up. About the grant. Make sure the funds transferred properly. That you have everything you need to implement your expansion plans. You could have called. Or emailed. I could have. He met her eyes. But I wanted to see it. The work. If you have time. Francis studied him. 2 weeks ago at Middleton Place, he'd been polished and distant, present but not really there. Now, sitting across from her in a coffee shop on a Saturday morning, he looked almost vulnerable. His fingers tapped against the table. Nervous energy from a man who probably didn't get nervous. You want to visit Brush and Soul? If that's appropriate. She should say no. Should maintain professional boundaries between non-profit founder and corporate donor. Should recognize that this man, this billionaire CEO who looked at her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve, was dangerous to her carefully rebuilt equilibrium. Instead, she heard herself say, "We have a session this afternoon. 2 to 5, at the community center on Meeting Street. You're welcome to observe." Something in his expression shifted. Relief, maybe. "I'll be there." "It's messy," she warned. "Paint everywhere. Loud. Kids being kids. Not corporate or polished." "Good," Colton said quietly. "I'm tired of polished." He stood to leave, then hesitated. "Your mother. When did you lose her?" The question was unexpected. Personal. September 2021. Cancer. She was 62. Francis's throat tightened the way it always did. "I was 31. Not ready. Though I don't think you're ever ready." "No," Colton agreed, something heavy in his voice. "You're not." He left before she could ask what he meant. Colton showed up at 1:55 that afternoon. Francis was setting up supplies when she heard the community center door open. She turned, expecting one of her regular volunteers, and instead found Colton Hicks standing in the doorway looking wildly out of place. He'd changed clothes, dark jeans that probably cost more than her car payment, a gray Henley, expensive boots. Casual, but the kind of casual that still screamed money. He held 2 coffees from the shop where they'd talked that morning. "Peace offering," he said, extending one toward her. "I remembered you were drinking a vanilla latte. I hope that's still right." Francis took the cup, touched that he'd noticed. "Thank you. You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." The kids started arriving at 2. Jayla came first, hugging Francis around the waist before noticing Colton and going shy. Marcus arrived with his older brother, followed by twins Sage and River, then 8 more students ranging from age 8 to 15. They looked at Colton with open curiosity. "Everybody, this is Mr. Hicks," Francis announced. "His company gave us the grant that's letting us expand our programs. He wanted to see what we do here." "You can paint with us if you want," Jayla offered. "Miss Francis says everybody's an artist if they try." Colton looked genuinely startled. "I don't think." "You scared?" Marcus challenged, all 13-year-old bravado. Something flickered across Colton's face. Not offense, more like he was being seen through. "Actually, yes. I'm not good at this." "Nobody's good at first," Sage said matter-of-factly. "That's why you practice." Francis watched Colton process this simple wisdom from a 10-year-old. Then, to her shock, he nodded. "All right, what do I do?" The next 3 hours rewrote everything Francis thought she knew about Colton Hicks. He sat at the paint-splattered table with Jayla and Sage, listening intently as they explained color theory they'd learned last week. He helped Marcus stretch a new canvas, following the 13-year-old's instructions without ego. When River accidentally knocked over a jar of paint water and started crying, Colton knelt down to her level, helped her clean it up, and told her about the time he'd spilled coffee all over a presentation to investors. "Did they still give you money?" River asked, sniffling. "Eventually. But I had to redo the whole presentation with brown stains on every page. Very humbling." River giggled. Francis found herself watching him instead of working. The way he really listened when the kids talked. How he didn't check his phone once in 3 hours. The moment when Jayla asked what he was going to paint and he went quiet, staring at the blank canvas like it held answers he'd been looking for. "I don't know what to paint," he finally admitted. "Paint what you feel," Jayla said simply. Colton's hand moved to his chest again. That same gesture from the gala, fingers pressed over his heart. Then, slowly, he picked up a brush. By 4:30, most of the kids had finished and were cleaning up. Francis walked over to where Colton still sat, staring at his canvas. He'd painted water. Dark, churning ocean water under a night sky. No moon. No stars. Just waves and darkness, and somewhere in the center, a single point of light beneath the surface. Drowning or emerging, impossible to tell. "That's what you feel?" Francis asked quietly. Colton didn't look at her. "For a long time, yes." He set down the brush. "I lost someone. 5 years ago. May 2019. I was 32, engaged, thought I knew exactly how my life would unfold." His voice was carefully controlled. "She died in a car accident. I made promises at her grave that I've kept ever since." Francis's chest tightened. "I'm sorry." Everyone sorry. He finally turned to her. But you understand, don't you? What it's like to lose someone who was your whole world? My mama was my best friend, Frances said. Losing her felt like losing gravity. Like I might just float away into nothing. Yes. The word came out rough. Exactly that. They stood there in the community center with kids laughing and cleaning paintbrushes around them, and Frances felt the space between them shrink to something dangerous and necessary. The light, she said, gesturing to his painting. Under the water. You included light. Colton stared at the canvas like he was seeing it for the first time. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I didn't realize I had. April 15, 2024. Colton started showing up at brush and soul sessions every Saturday. At first, he told himself it was due diligence. Monitoring the grant investment. Ensuring proper fund utilization. All the corporate justifications that sounded reasonable in board meetings. But the truth he wouldn't admit to Garrett, barely admitted to himself, was that Saturday afternoons with paint-covered kids and Frances Harper's smile were the only time he felt human anymore. He was 37 years old, worth $2.3 billion, and the highlight of his week was helping 10-year-old Jayla mix the perfect shade of purple. You're getting better, Frances told him one afternoon in mid-April. They were cleaning up after the kids left, washing brushes side by side at the industrial sink. You're painting. It's less dark and depressing? She laughed. I was going to say emotionally monochromatic, but sure. Colton smiled. Actually smiled. When was the last time that happened? I have a good teacher. The kids are good teachers. They don't overthink it. They just create. I wasn't talking about the kids. Frances's hand stilled in the soapy water. She turned to look at him, and he was close enough to see the gold flecks in her dark brown eyes. Close enough to smell her perfume, something warm and a little sweet, like vanilla and honey. Close enough to do something incredibly stupid. Colton, she said softly. It was the first time she'd used his first name, and hearing it in her voice did something to his chest. I should go, he said, not moving. Probably. Neither of them moved. His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. Garrett, board meeting moved to 6 p.m. You need to be there. Colton stepped back, pulled out of whatever gravity well had been pulling him toward her. I have to, work thing. Of course. Frances turned back to the sink, but he could see the flush on her cheeks. See you next Saturday? He should say no. Should stop coming here. Should remember his vow and the promises made at gravestones and the fact that loving someone meant giving them the power to destroy you. Next Saturday, he heard himself say. April 28, 2024. You need to ask her out properly. Colton looked up from his laptop. Garrett stood in his office doorway with his arms crossed and the expression of someone who'd reached the end of his patience. I don't know what you're talking about. Frances Harper. The woman you've been visiting every Saturday for 6 weeks. The one you talk about constantly without realizing you're talking about her. The one who made you smile, actually smile, for the first time since Victoria died. The name landed like a punch. Colton's jaw tightened. Don't. Someone has to. Garrett walked in, closed the door. Colton, I loved Victoria too. We all did. But she's gone. She's been gone for 5 years. And I know you made some vow. I promised her. You promised a gravestone. Garrett's voice rose. You think Victoria would want this? Want you alone and miserable for the rest of your life? You think that honors her? Colton stood abruptly, sending his chair rolling back. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. If I let myself love someone again, his voice cracked. He swallowed hard, forced control. If I let myself love Frances, and I lose her too, it will kill me. Actually kill me. I can't survive that twice. Silence filled the office. Garrett's voice, when he spoke again, was gentle. And if you don't let yourself love her? If you walk away from the first real connection you've had in 5 years because you're too afraid? That won't kill you. No. Colton met his friend's eyes. That's just existing. I'm good at existing. That's not living, Colton. That's dying slowly. After Garrett left, Colton stood at his windows watching the city below. Somewhere out there, Frances was probably in her colorful apartment, grading student artwork or painting something beautiful or calling her sister in Atlanta. Living her life. While he was up here in his sterile penthouse, clinging to promises made in grief. His hand moved to the ring under his shirt. I'm sorry, he thought to Victoria. To the memory of her. To the future they'd never have. I'm so sorry. Then he pulled out his phone and texted Frances before he could overthink it. Dinner tomorrow? Not business. Just us. 3 minutes of staring at the screen. Then, yes. Just us. Colton sat down hard in his chair, heart pounding like he'd just made the most terrifying decision of his life. He had. Welcome back to Tales of the Heart, where we bring you emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul. If you're just joining us for the first time, you're welcome to this wonderful big family. We're so glad to have you here. Please make sure to watch till the end, and if today's story moves you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and share this video with your family and loved ones. Now, let's continue. April 29, 2024. Frances changed outfits 4 times before Sienna called. "You're spiraling," her sister said without preamble when Frances answered. "I can feel it from Atlanta." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I'm going to dinner." "With the billionaire?" "With Colton, yes." Frances stared at her reflection. The navy dress looked too formal. The yellow sundress too casual. Everything felt wrong. "See, what am I doing? This is a terrible idea." "Why?" "Because he's a billionaire CEO who lives in a completely different world. Because he lost someone he loved and clearly hasn't dealt with it. Because I'm still figuring out how to exist without Mama, and I don't have room for someone else's grief on top of mine." Frances sat on her bed, suddenly exhausted. "Because the way he looks at me scares me." "Scares you how?" "Like I matter. Like I could be important to him. Like he's trying really hard not to feel something he already feels." Her voice dropped. "And I'm feeling it too, and that terrifies me." Sienna was quiet for a moment. "You know what Mama would say? That I'm overthinking it? That love isn't something you schedule when you're ready. It shows up when it shows up, and you either let it in or spend your whole life wondering what if." Sienna's voice softened. "Frances, you've been so strong for so long. Taking care of Mama, building the nonprofit, being there for everyone else. Maybe it's okay to let someone take care of you for once." "I don't need taking care of. Wanting it doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." After they hung up, Frances put on the emerald dress, the one from the gala. The one Colton had noticed. Then she texted him, "Still on for tonight?" His response came immediately, "I've been ready since yesterday. Picking you up at 7. Husk Restaurant was exactly the kind of place Frances expected a billionaire to choose, intimate, expensive, the kind of establishment where reservations were booked months in advance. But when Colton arrived at her apartment at 7, he looked as nervous as she felt. "You look beautiful," he said when she opened the door. He wore a dark suit but no tie, the top button of his shirt undone. His eyes held the same uncertainty she'd seen at the coffee shop. "Is this okay? We can go somewhere else if you'd rather." "Colton." She smiled. "It's perfect. You're rambling." "I'm nervous." The admission was so honest, so unlike the controlled CEO she'd met at the gala, that Frances felt something in her chest ease. "Me too." His answering smile transformed his face. "Good. I mean, not good that you're nervous, but good that I'm not alone in it." Dinner was supposed to be simple. Get to know each other. See if the connection they'd felt over paintbrushes and coffee translated to a real date. Instead, they talked for 3 hours. Colton told her about growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Columbia, South Carolina. How his father had been a mechanic and his mother a teacher, both working multiple jobs to make ends meet. How he'd gotten into USC on scholarship, taught himself to code in the library, and built his first app junior year that sold for enough to start his company. "Everyone thinks I came from money," he said, turning his wine glass but not drinking. "That I had connections or family wealth. I didn't. I had student loans and a laptop held together with duct tape and a ridiculous amount of stubbornness." "Self-made," Frances said. "That's impressive." "It's lonely." The word seemed to surprise him. Building something from nothing means you can't really trust who's there for you versus who's there for what you can give them. Frances understood that. "When Mama got sick, I found out real quick who my real friends were. Some people disappeared. Couldn't handle the reality of cancer and death. Others showed up every single day. Nadine held my hand through the worst of it. She'd lost her husband to cancer 5 years before Mama got diagnosed. She knew." Frances traced the rim of her water glass. "She told me something I didn't understand at the time. She said grief doesn't mean you stop living. It means you learn to carry love in a different way." Colton's hand had moved to his chest again. That gesture. Always over his heart. "What are you holding on to?" Frances asked quietly. "Under your shirt. You touch it when things get emotional." He went very still. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he reached up and pulled out a thin platinum chain. Hanging from it was an engagement ring, elegant, simple, a single diamond that caught the candlelight. "Victoria," he said. "My fiancée. She died 5 years ago this May. I was going to propose the night of the accident." His voice was steady but his eyes weren't. "I never got to give her this. So I've worn it ever since. A reminder of what I lost. Of the promise I made." Frances's throat tightened. "What promise?" "That I'd never love anyone else." He looked directly at her. "That I'd stay faithful to her memory. That I wouldn't survive losing someone like that again, so I just wouldn't risk it." The weight of what he was really saying settled between them. And now? Francis whispered. Now I'm sitting here with you, breaking that promise just by wanting to. Colton's hand trembled slightly as he tucked the ring back under his shirt. I'm terrified, Francis. You make me feel things I vowed I'd never feel again. She should be angry. Should recognize that he was nowhere near ready for this. Should protect herself from becoming involved with a man still wearing his dead fiancé's ring around his neck. Instead, she reached across the table and took his hand. I'm scared too, she admitted. Losing Mama broke something in me. Made me afraid to need anyone too much because everyone leaves eventually. Death or distance or just life getting in the way. She squeezed his fingers. But Colton, wearing that ring like armor? Making vows to ghosts? That's not honoring Victoria. That's punishing yourself. I know. The admission seemed to cost him. I know, but I don't know how to stop. Maybe you don't stop all at once. Maybe you just take one step, then another. See if the ground holds. He looked at their joined hands. What if I'm not strong enough? What if you are? May 20th, 2024. 3 weeks after their first official date, Colton and Francis fell into a rhythm. Saturdays at Brush and Soul with the kids. Quiet dinners at small restaurants where they talked until closing. A Sunday afternoon walking the Battery, watching sailboats on the harbor while Francis told him about her students and he told her about acquisition deals that didn't feel as important anymore. He still wore Victoria's ring. Francis pretended not to notice the way he touched it whenever they got too close, too real. On May 20th, they were walking through Waterfront Park at sunset when Colton's phone rang. He glanced at it, and Francis watched all the color drain from his face. I need to take this, he said quietly. I'm sorry. He walked several feet away, but she could still hear fragments. Eleanor, no, that's not. I understand you're upset, but please don't. When he came back, he looked wrecked. Victoria's mother, he said before Francis could ask. She's in Charleston. She wants to meet. Okay. She knows. About you. About us. Someone sent her photos from that restaurant last week. Colton ran his hands through his hair. Eleanor she's never accepted that Victoria's gone. She keeps Victoria's room exactly the same. Talks about her in present tense. She's fragile. And you feel responsible for her grief. Victoria was her only child. When she died, Eleanor lost everything. I'm the only connection to her daughter she has left. His voice cracked. She asked me, at the funeral, she asked me to promise I wouldn't forget Victoria. Wouldn't replace her. Francis felt cold despite the warm May evening. And you promised. I promised. They stood by the pineapple fountain with tourists taking photos around them and the sun setting over the water, and Francis felt the ground starting to shift under her feet. What are you going to tell her? She asked. The truth. That I'm not trying to replace Victoria. That I'm just trying to live again. Wearing her engagement ring around your neck? The words came out sharper than she intended. Colton flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? Francis turned to face him fully. Colton, I care about you. More than I should, probably. But I can't compete with a ghost. I can't be the person who helps you heal just so you can go back to your vow when things get hard. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Because from where I'm standing, you've got 1 foot in the present with me and 1 foot in the past with her, and eventually you're going to have to choose. I'm here, aren't I? I'm trying. Are you? Francis heard her voice rising and couldn't stop it. 3 years of grief, of rebuilding, of protecting herself, all coming out at once. Because trying means actually letting go. It means taking off that ring. It means choosing to move forward instead of keeping one hand on the door in case you need to run back to what's safe. Safe? Colton's voice matched hers now. You think grief is safe? You think spending 5 years half alive is safe? I think it's easier than risking your heart again, yes. The words hung between them. Tourists stared. Francis realized she was crying and wasn't sure when that started. Colton looked at her with something that might have been heartbreak or anger or both. I should go. Eleanor wants to meet tomorrow. I need to figure out what to say. Colton. I'll call you after. He left. Francis stood by the fountain as the sun disappeared and the string lights came on and her phone buzzed with a text from Nadine. You okay, baby? Saw you and Colton at the park. Looked intense. She wasn't okay. She was 34 years old, finally letting herself feel something real after years of protective numbness, and the man she was falling for was still in love with someone else. Francis sat on a bench and called Sienna. He's still wearing her ring, she said when her sister answered. Oh, honey. I told him he has to choose. Past or present. Her or me. Francis wiped her eyes. See, what if he chooses her? What if I'm not enough to make him want to let go? Then he's not ready, Sienna said gently. And you deserve someone who is. May 21st, 2024. Colton met Eleanor Chen at a small tea room on King Street. She looked older than he remembered, 63 now, graying hair she used to dye, wearing the same necklace Victoria had given her for Christmas years ago. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. "Colton, you look well." "Eleanor." He hugged her, feeling her frailty, her grief still fresh as an open wound 5 years later. "It's good to see you." They sat. Ordered tea neither of them would drink. And then Eleanor said the words he'd been dreading. "Tell me about her. This woman. The one you're replacing my daughter with." "I'm not replacing Victoria." "No?" Eleanor pulled out her phone, showed him photos someone had sent her. Colton and Frances at dinner. Walking through the Battery. Him smiling, actually smiling, at something Frances said. "You look happy. You never looked happy with Victoria." "That's not true. She was planning the wedding, Colton. Did you know that? She had the venue picked out, the dress, everything. She was going to surprise you with the proposal plans after you asked her." Eleanor's hands shook. "And then she died, and you gave up. You didn't fight for her memory. You just moved on. I wore her ring for 5 years. Around your neck like a burden. Not on your finger like a promise." Eleanor was crying fully now. "My daughter loved you. She wanted forever with you. And you're giving that to someone else." The guilt was crushing. Suffocating. Everything he'd felt at Victoria's graveside 5 years ago came flooding back, the promises, the vows, the certainty that loving anyone else would be a betrayal. "I'm sorry," Colton said, and meant it. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." Then stop seeing her. Honor Victoria. Keep your promise. He thought about Frances. The way she looked at the world like it was still full of beauty despite loss. How she made him feel human again. How for the first time in 5 years, he'd painted something with light in it. He thought about the vow he'd made at a gravestone when he was 32 and broken and convinced he'd never survive loving anyone again. He thought about what Garrett had said, "That's not living. That's dying slowly." "I can't," Colton whispered. Eleanor stood abruptly. "Then you never really loved her." She left. Colton sat in the tea room for an hour, staring at nothing, feeling everything. Then he pulled out his phone and called Frances. It went to voicemail. "Frances, it's me. Eleanor, it didn't go well. She asked me to choose. Stop seeing you or dishonor Victoria's memory. I told her I couldn't. I can't stop." His voice broke. "I need to see you. Please. I need to." The voicemail cut him off. He tried calling again. No answer. Texted, "Please talk to me." Nothing. By the time he drove to her apartment, her car was gone. He called Nadine. "She's not ready to talk to you," Nadine said gently. "She needs time to think." "About what?" "About whether loving you is worth the pain of competing with a ghost." The line went dead. Colton sat in his car outside Frances's empty apartment building and finally, let himself break. Welcome back to Tales of the Heart, where we bring you emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul. If you're just joining us for the first time, you're welcome to this wonderful big family. We're so glad to have you here. Please make sure to watch till the end, and if today's story moves you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and share this video with your family and loved ones. Now, let's continue. May 22nd, 2024. Frances didn't go home after leaving her apartment the night before. She'd driven to Nadine's house in the suburbs, arriving at 10 o'clock with tears streaming down her face and her heart feeling like broken glass. Nadine had taken one look at her, pulled her inside, and made tea neither of them drank. Now, at 7 in the morning, Frances sat on Nadine's back porch watching cardinals at the bird feeder and trying to remember how to breathe. "You love him," Nadine said. It wasn't a question. Frances didn't answer right away. She was 34 years old. She'd loved her father before he died when she was 12. She'd loved her mama with everything in her until cancer took her 3 years ago. She knew what love cost. "I'm falling in love with him," she finally admitted. "Which is possibly the stupidest thing I've ever done." "Why?" "Because he's not available." "Not really. He's still so tangled up in grief and guilt that there's no room for me." Frances wrapped her hands around her mug. "When he looks at me, I see it. He wants to move forward. But then he touches that ring, and I watch him pull back. Like being happy is a betrayal." Nadine was quiet for a long moment. At 72, she'd lived enough life to know when to speak and when to wait. "Finally, when my husband died, I thought I'd die too. Cancer took him in 6 months. I was 52, and suddenly alone after 30 years of marriage." Frances had heard this story before, but she listened again. "Everyone told me I was young enough to find someone else. Move on. Start over." Nadine smiled sadly. "But I couldn't imagine it. Loving James had been my whole adult life. How could I give that to someone else? How could I dishonor what we had?" What changed? Time, therapy, and eventually understanding that love isn't a finite resource. Loving someone new doesn't erase who you loved before. It's not replacement, it's expansion. Nadine reached over and squeezed Francis's hand. But baby, here's the thing, the person has to be ready for that truth. You can't love someone into healing. They have to choose it themselves. So what do? You decide how long you're willing to wait. And if he's worth the wait. Francis's phone had 17 missed calls from Colton. 12 voicemails. 23 texts that started with please talk to me and devolved into I'm sorry and I don't know what to do. She hadn't read past the previews. I need space, she said. I need to figure out if I'm strong enough to love someone who might never fully love me back. Same day, 9 a.m. Colton hadn't slept. He sat in his penthouse office, not the corporate headquarters, the one here at home where he came when he needed to think. Except thinking wasn't working. His mind kept circling back to Francis's words at Waterfront Park. You've got 1 foot in the present with me and 1 foot in the past with her, and eventually you're going to have to choose. She was right. He knew she was right. But knowing and doing were different continents, and Colton had no map for crossing the ocean between them. His hand moved to the chain around his neck. Victoria's ring, worn for 1,827 days straight. He'd taken it off exactly twice, once to clean it, once when the chain broke and needed replacing. Both times, the absence had felt like missing a limb. Garrett arrived at 10, using the key Colton had given him for emergencies. One look at Colton's face, and he knew. She won't talk to you. No. Colton's voice was rough from hours of not speaking. Eleanor asked me to choose. Stop seeing Francis or dishonor Victoria's memory. I told her I couldn't stop. Then Francis said basically the same thing. Choose the past or the present. I can't, his voice broke. I don't know how to let go. Of Victoria? Of the guilt. Of the feeling that if I'm happy, I'm betraying her. That if I take off this ring, I'm saying she didn't matter. Colton pulled the chain out, stared at the diamond catching the morning light. I was going to marry her, Garrett. We were supposed to have forever. I know. Garrett sat down across from him. But Colton, she's gone. She's been gone for 5 years. And I know you promised her mother, promised yourself, that you'd never forget her. But living the rest of your life as a monument to her death? That's not what Victoria would have wanted. How do you know? Because I knew her too. Remember? Garrett's voice was gentle but firm. Victoria was the most alive person I've ever met. She dragged you to concerts you hated, made you try foods you said you wouldn't like, forced you out of your comfort zone constantly. You think she'd want you locked in this self-imposed prison of grief? Colton closed his eyes. Memories flooded back, Victoria laughing at his terrible dancing. Victoria stealing fries off his plate. Victoria planning their future with an enthusiasm that had terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. She made me promise, he whispered. The night before she died. We'd been fighting about the wedding, stupid stuff, whether to have a DJ or a band. She said, promise me we'll figure it out. Promise me forever. His throat closed. I promised. And 12 hours later, she was gone. Oh, Colton. Garrett's voice cracked. You think she meant forever in grief? Forever alone? That's not a promise, that's a curse you put on yourself. I don't know how to take it off. The ring. All of it. The guilt. The vow. The certainty that loving Francis means losing Victoria all over again. Colton looked at his best friend with naked desperation. What if I do it? What if I choose Francis, and then I lose her too? What if this ends the same way and I can't survive it twice? What if you don't choose her, Garrett countered, and you lose her anyway? What if the only thing you're guaranteed in life is right now, and you're wasting it being afraid of tomorrow? The words hit like a physical blow. Colton stood abruptly, walked to the windows overlooking Charleston Harbor. Somewhere out there, Francis was hurting. Questioning whether he was worth her love. Wondering if she'd made a mistake letting him into her carefully reconstructed life. And here he was, still clinging to a promise made to the dead instead of fighting for a future with the living. I need to talk to someone, he said quietly. Francis. Victoria. May 23, 2024. The cemetery was quiet at dawn. Colton hadn't been here since the funeral 5 years ago. He'd told himself it was too painful, that avoiding it was easier. The truth was he'd been terrified of what coming here would mean, facing the reality of Victoria's death instead of the sanitized memory he'd built in his head. Her gravestone was simple. Victoria Lin Chen. 1987 to 2019, beloved daughter, cherished fiancé, bright light gone too soon. Colton knelt in the grass, and for the first time in 5 years, let himself really feel it. The loss. The anger. The unfairness of 32 years cut short because of rain-slicked roads and bad timing. The future they'd planned, wedding, house, kids, growing old together, All of it erased in one terrible moment. He cried. Ugly, wrenching sobs he'd held back for 1,829 days. When he could finally breathe again, he spoke. I'm sorry, Vic. I'm so sorry I couldn't save you. That I wasn't there. That you died thinking we were fighting about something that didn't matter. His voice was raw. I've spent 5 years trying to keep you alive by refusing to live myself. I thought that's what honoring you meant. Staying faithful. Never moving on. A breeze moved through the cemetery. Birds sang somewhere nearby. But I met someone. Her name is Frances. She's incredible. Smart and kind, and she sees beauty in broken things. She makes me want to be alive again, not just existing. And I'm terrified, because loving her feels like letting you go, and I don't know how to do that. Colton pulled a chain from around his neck. Held the ring in his palm, the diamond engagement ring he'd carried for 5 years like penance. I love you. I'll always love you. You were my first real love, and losing you broke me in ways I'm still putting back together. Tears streamed down his face. But Vic, I can't stay broken forever. I can't spend the rest of my life mourning what we didn't get to have instead of living the life I still have. He thought about what Nadine had told Frances, words that Garrett had shared with him during one of their late-night conversations. Love isn't a finite resource. Loving someone new doesn't erase who you loved before. I'm not replacing you, Colton whispered. I'm making space for someone else alongside you. And I hope, wherever you are, you'd understand that. You'd want me to be happy. To live fully. To take risks and be vulnerable and let someone in again. He looked at the ring one last time. Then, slowly, he slipped it off the chain. The weight of it in his palm felt both enormous and insignificant. 5 years of grief and promises and protection, all contained in this small circle of platinum and diamond. I'm going to leave this here, he said. With you. Where it belongs. Because it was always meant for you, and keeping it doesn't bring you back. It just keeps me from moving forward. Colton dug a small hole next to the gravestone and placed the ring inside. Covered it with earth. And as he did, he felt something in his chest finally release, not the love for Victoria, but the guilt. The crushing weight of survivor's remorse. The vow that had been slowly killing him. He stood, touched the gravestone one last time. Thank you for loving me. For teaching me what it meant to be loved. I'll carry that with me always. His voice steadied. But I'm going to live now. Really live. And I hope wherever you are, you're at peace. The sun was rising over the cemetery, painting everything gold. Colton walked back to his car feeling lighter than he had in 5 years. May 24, 2024. Frances was teaching her Saturday session at Brush and Soul when Nadine appeared in the doorway with an expression that meant trouble. He's here, she said quietly. Frances's heart jumped. Who? Who do you think? Through the window, Frances could see Colton's car in the parking lot. He was leaning against it, waiting. Not coming in. Not demanding. Just there. I don't know if I'm ready, Frances said. Then tell him that. But baby, you're going to have to talk to him eventually. The kids finished their projects. Frances helped them clean up, her mind only half present. When the last parent picked up their child, she couldn't avoid it anymore. She walked outside. Colton straightened when he saw her. He looked rough, exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. But there was something different about him. Something lighter. Hi, he said. Hi. They stood in the parking lot with afternoon sun beating down and traffic noise from Meeting Street and all the words they needed to say building between them. I went to Victoria's grave, Colton said finally. 2 days ago. First time since the funeral. Frances waited. I left the ring there. Buried it next to her. He pulled his shirt aside, showing her his bare neck. No chain. No weight. I can't change the past 5 years. I can't undo the vow I made or the time I wasted being half alive. But I can choose differently now. Colton. Let me finish. Please. He took a shaky breath. You were right. I had one foot in the past and one in the present, and that's not fair to you. It's not fair to either of us. So I'm here, right now, with both feet firmly in the present, asking if you'll give me another chance. Frances felt tears building. I've been afraid too. Of losing someone again. Of needing you too much. Of this ending and being shattered all over again. I can't promise it won't end, Colton said honestly. I can't promise forever, because I learned the hardest way that nothing's guaranteed. But I can promise I'm here now, fully present, choosing you. Choosing us. Choosing to risk my heart because you're worth the risk. He stepped closer. Close enough that she could see the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear, the hope. I'm falling in love with you, Frances Harper. And that terrifies me. But living without you terrifies me more. The words hung in the warm May air. Frances thought about Mama, who'd loved fiercely until the very end. About Nadine, who'd survived loss and found meaning anyway. About her own heart, scarred but still beating, still capable of this impossible hope. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. And I'm scared. Me too. So what do we do? Colton reached for her hand. She let him take it. We take one step. Then another. See if the ground holds. Her own words from their first date, given back to her. Francis smiled through tears. Okay. One step. Together? Together. He pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, letting herself feel the solidity of him, the warmth, the realness. This wasn't a ghost or a memory or a safe fantasy. This was a man, flawed and grieving and learning to live again. Just like her. When they finally pulled apart, Colton cupped her face in his hands. I need to do this right. No more halfway. No more holding back. What does that mean? It means I want all of it. Real dates. Meeting your sister. Showing up for your students not just as a donor but as someone in your life. It means introducing you to Garrett officially, bringing you to company events, letting everyone know you matter to me. His thumb brushed her cheek. It means building something real. If you'll have me. Francis thought about all the reasons this could fail. The grief they both carried. The different worlds they came from. The very real possibility of loss. Then she thought about Mama's voice. Love isn't something you schedule when you're ready. It shows up when it shows up. I'll have you, she said. All the messy, complicated, scary parts. I'm in. Colton kissed her then, slow and gentle and full of promise. When they broke apart, both of them were crying and smiling and holding on to each other like lifelines. Nadine appeared in the community center doorway, saw them, and smiled before disappearing back inside. I should warn you, Francis said, still in Colton's arms, Sienna is going to interrogate you. Extensively. I'd expect nothing less from someone who loves you. And your world, the galas, the corporate events, the wealth, that's not my world. I don't know how to navigate it. Then we'll figure it out together. And Francis? He pulled back enough to look at her. Your world, the paint and the kids and the joy you bring to everything, that's exactly the world I want to be part of. They stood in the parking lot as the sun moved lower in the sky, holding each other, both terrified and hopeful. Two people learning to love after loss. Two hearts choosing to risk everything again. Together. Welcome back to Tales of the Heart, where we bring you emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul. If you're just joining us for the first time, you're welcome to this wonderful big family. We're so glad to have you here. Please make sure to watch till the end, and if today's story moves you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and share this video with your family and loved ones. Now, let's continue. June 15, 2024. The first time Colton met Sienna Harper officially, she made him wait in Francis's living room for 20 minutes while she assessed the situation. Francis had warned him. My sister is protective. Aggressively protective. Just be patient. So Colton sat on the coral-colored couch surrounded by paintings and photographs and life, while Sienna, 29, stunning, and radiating suspicion, studied him like a specimen under a microscope. You're the billionaire, she finally said. I'm Colton, yes. Who wore his dead fiancée's ring for 5 years. Direct. He appreciated that. Yes. And now you've decided my sister is worth taking it off for? Sienna, Francis started. No, it's okay. Colton met Sienna's challenging gaze. You're right to ask. And the answer is yes. Francis is worth that and more. But I didn't take the ring off for her. I took it off for myself. Because I was dying slowly, and she reminded me what it felt like to be alive. Sienna's expression didn't soften. My sister has been through hell. Lost our daddy when she was 12. Nursed our mama through cancer and watched her die. Built a non-profit from nothing while grieving. She doesn't need a project. She doesn't need someone else's pain on top of her own. You're absolutely right. She doesn't. Colton leaned forward. I can't promise I'm completely healed. Grief doesn't work that way. But I can promise I'm actively choosing to move forward. I'm in therapy. I'm doing the work. And I will never make Francis responsible for fixing me. Therapy? Sienna's eyebrows rose. Started 3 weeks ago. Twice a week. It had been Garrett's suggestion after the cemetery, and the hardest, best decision Colton had made in years. I'm learning to carry grief without letting it consume me. To honor what I lost without sacrificing what I still have. Something shifted in Sienna's expression. Not quite approval, but maybe the beginning of it. Francis loves you, she said quietly. I can hear it in her voice when she talks about you. She's happy. Actually happy. And if you do anything to take that away from her, I will make your life a living hell. Billionaire or not. Understood. And I'll help, Francis added, sliding her hand into Colton's. He looked at the two sisters, Francis and Sienna, 5 years apart, united in fierce love and protective instinct, and felt something settle in his chest. This was family. Real, messy, beautiful family. I love her too, he said, looking at Sienna but squeezing Francis's hand. More than I thought I'd ever be capable of loving anyone again. Sienna studied them both for a long moment. Then, finally, she smiled. Okay. But I'm watching you. I'd expect nothing less. July 20th, 2024. Garrett's annual summer party was the kind of event Colton usually dreaded. His entire executive team, major clients, board members, all gathered at Garrett's waterfront home for an evening of networking disguised as leisure. This year, he brought Frances. She stood beside him on the deck overlooking Charleston Harbor, wearing a yellow sundress that made her look like concentrated sunshine, and Colton couldn't stop watching her. The way she spoke to his COO about Brush and Soul's expansion plans. How she made his board chair laugh with a story about one of her students. The ease with which she moved through his world without losing herself in it. You're staring, Garrett murmured, appearing at his elbow with 2 beers. I'm aware. She's good for you. You know that, right? You smile now. Actual, genuine smiles. I didn't think I'd see that again. Colton took the beer but didn't drink. Across the deck, Frances was crouched down talking to Garrett's 6-year-old daughter, admiring a drawing. The little girl was beaming. She makes everything better. The work, the city, my life. It's like she brought color back to a world that had gone gray. That's love, my friend. I know. Colton watched Frances stand, ruffle the little girl's hair, and glance around until she found him. When their eyes met, she smiled, that genuine, unguarded smile that still made his chest ache. I want to marry her, Garrett. His best friend nearly choked on his beer. What? Not tomorrow. She needs time. We need time. But eventually, Colton's voice was certain in a way it hadn't been about anything since before Victoria died. I want forever with her. The real kind. The earned kind. Does she know? Not yet. But she will. August 10th, 2024. They were painting in Frances's apartment, a lazy Saturday morning tradition they'd developed over the past month, when Colton said the words for the first time. I love you. Frances's brush stopped mid-stroke. She turned from her canvas, paint-splattered and beautiful, and stared at him. What? I love you. He set down his own brush, suddenly nervous despite the certainty flooding his veins. I know we said we were taking it slow. I know it's only been 3 months since we started this officially. But Frances, I love you. I'm in love with you. And I needed you to know. She was crying. Happy tears, he thought, hoped, based on the smile breaking across her face. I love you too, she whispered. I've been too scared to say it. Too afraid of jinxing it or moving too fast or. He kissed her. Slow and deep and tasting like paint water and coffee and everything right in the world. When they broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing and holding on to each other in her tiny, colorful apartment while half-finished paintings surrounded them. Say it again, Frances demanded. I love you. Again. I love you, Frances Harper. I love your art and your heart and the way you see beauty in everything. I love how you talk to your mama like she's still here. I love your terrible taste in reality TV and how you cry at commercials and the way you make every single person you meet feel valued. Colton. I love that you pushed me to live again when I'd forgotten how. That you were patient with my grief while dealing with your own. That you're strong and soft at the same time. That you make me want to be better. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you. All of you. Every complicated, beautiful part. Frances kissed him again, and they stayed tangled together on her paint-splattered floor, whispering I love you like the prayer it was. September 5th, 2024. The call came during a Hicks Global Board meeting. Colton saw Frances's name on his phone and immediately stood. I need to take this. Excuse me. In the hallway, Frances? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Her voice was breathless, excited. Colton, we got it. The grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. $2 million over 3 years. We can expand to 5 new sites. Hire a full staff. Build the program I've been dreaming about. The joy in her voice was infectious. Frances, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you. The seed funding from Hicks Global gave us the foundation to even apply for something this big. A pause. I'm at the nonprofit now. Can you come? I want to celebrate with you. I'm leaving right now. He went back into the boardroom, announced he was leaving, and ignored the surprised looks from his executive team. Let them be surprised. Let them see that Frances mattered more than any acquisition deal or quarterly report. When he arrived at the Brush and Soul offices, Frances was standing outside with Nadine, both of them crying happy tears. She ran to him, and he caught her, spinning her around while she laughed. I'm so proud of you, he said again, setting her down but not letting go. You built this. You believed in it when no one else did. This is all you. It's us, Frances corrected. You believed in it too. In me. Nadine watched them with the satisfied smile of someone who'd predicted this exact outcome. You two are disgustingly adorable. I approve. That evening, Colton took Frances to dinner at Peninsula Grill, celebratory, fancy, the kind of place he'd avoided for years because joy felt like betrayal. Now, sitting across from Frances while she talked a mile a minute about expansion plans and curriculum development and dreams becoming reality, he couldn't remember why he'd ever denied himself this. Life, love, hope, all the things worth living for. I want you to meet someone, he said when dessert arrived. Frances tilted her head. Who? Victoria's father. Richard Chen. Colton had been thinking about this for weeks. Eleanor won't speak to me, and I've accepted that. But Richard, he reached out last month. Said he'd heard I was moving forward, and he was glad. He wants to meet you. Colton, are you sure? I don't want to cause more pain. You're not. You're part of my healing. Part of my life. And Richard understands that loving you doesn't mean I've forgotten his daughter. Colton reached across the table, took her hand. If you're comfortable with it, I'd like him to meet the woman I'm going to marry. Frances went very still. What did you just say? He smiled. I said I'm going to marry you. Eventually. When you're ready. But I wanted you to know, you're it for me, Frances. The rest of my life. However long that is. That's not a proposal. No. That's a promise. The proposal comes later. When I've planned something worthy of you. He brought her hand to his lips. But I wanted you to know where my heart is. Where it's going to stay. She was crying again. You're going to make me ruin my makeup twice in one day. I love you. I love you too. So much it scares me. Me too. But we're doing it anyway. Yeah, Frances smiled through tears. We are. October 12, 2024. Colton spent 2 weeks planning. He enlisted Sienna, Nadine, and Garrett. Booked the location. Arranged every detail. And tried not to panic about the small velvet box in his desk drawer, not Victoria's ring, but something new. Something that represented a future instead of a past. The evening of October 12th, he told Frances he was taking her somewhere special. Should I be worried? She asked as they drove through Charleston in the autumn twilight. Should you trust me? That's not an answer. He smiled, nervous energy humming through him. Trust me. He brought her to Middleton Place, the same location where they'd first met 6 months ago at the gala. But now, in October, the gardens were different. Autumn leaves, cooler air, the reflection pool glowing in the sunset. And along the path, her students' artwork. Frances stopped, hand over her mouth. Every 10 feet, another painting, Jayla's abstract rainbow, Marcus's portrait series, the twins' collaborative landscape. All the kids from Brush and Soul, their art displayed like a gallery under the oak trees. Colton, what is this? Keep walking. At the end of the path, near the same spot where they'd stood for that photo 6 months ago, Frances's own paintings hung. The ones from her apartment. The ones she'd created while grieving her mama. While rebuilding her life. While falling in love. And standing beside them, Sienna, Nadine, Garrett, and all of Frances's students, grinning. Frances turned to Colton, tears already streaming. What did you do? He took both her hands. His heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe, but his voice was steady. 6 months ago, I came to this place as a ghost. Half alive, going through motions, convinced I'd never feel anything real again. And then I saw you. Standing on that stage, talking about your mama and breathing in hope. And something in me, something I thought was dead, woke up. Colton. Let me finish. Please. He squeezed her hands. You didn't fix me. You didn't erase my grief or make the pain disappear. But you showed me that I could carry the past without letting it destroy my future. That loving someone new doesn't dishonor who I loved before. That I could choose to live again. He let go of her hands long enough to pull out the small velvet box. When he opened it, Frances gasped. The ring was perfect, a deep green emerald surrounded by small diamonds. The color of the dress she'd worn the night they met. The color of life and growth and new beginnings. Colton knelt in the grass, in the same gardens where their story began, and looked up at the woman who'd saved him by letting him save himself. Frances Harper, you are the bravest, most beautiful soul I've ever known. You make me want to be better. To live fully. To love without fear. His voice cracked. I can't promise forever, because I've learned nothing is guaranteed. But I can promise that for however long I have, I will choose you. Every single day. Will you marry me? Frances was sobbing. Nodding. Yes. Yes, of course yes. He stood, slid the ring onto her finger, and kissed her while their family and her students cheered and applauded. When they broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing and holding onto each other like they'd never let go. I love you, Frances said against his lips. I love you too. So much. Jayla appeared beside them, tugging on Frances's dress. Does this mean Mr. Colton is going to be around forever? Frances looked at Colton, her eyes shining. Yeah, baby. Forever. Good, Jayla said matter-of-factly. He's getting better at painting. Everyone laughed, and Colton pulled Frances close, breathing in the reality of this moment. This impossible, beautiful, hard-won moment. He was 37 years old. He'd lost someone he loved. He'd survived grief that should have destroyed him. And now he was standing in a garden at sunset, engaged to a woman who taught him that healing wasn't betrayal, it was the bravest thing you could do. April 2025. The wedding took place at Magnolia Plantation and Gardens on a perfect spring afternoon. Small and intimate, just 50 people who mattered. Sienna as maid of honor. Garrett as best man. Nadine in the front row, crying proud tears. Frances's students serving as junior attendants, trying very hard to be serious and failing beautifully. And in the empty seat beside Nadine, a framed photo of Frances's mama and a single white rose. When Colton saw Frances walking toward him in a simple white dress with flowers in her natural hair, he couldn't stop the tears. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Not despite the grief they'd both survived, but because of it. Because she'd chosen joy anyway. Chosen love anyway. Chosen him. Frances reached the altar, took his hands, and whispered, "You ready for this?" Forever ready. The ceremony was short. The vows were personal, promises about showing up, about choosing each other daily, about building a life that honored the past while embracing the future. When the officiant pronounced them married, Colton kissed his wife like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. At the reception, Frances danced with her students. Colton watched from the edge of the dance floor, Garrett beside him. "You did it," Garrett said quietly. "You came back to life. She brought me back." "No." Garrett shook his head. "You chose to come back. She just gave you a reason." Colton thought about Victoria. About the ring buried beside her grave. About the 5 years he'd spent convinced that loving again would be betrayal. And he thought about what his therapist had told him, grief and joy can coexist. Honoring who you lost means living fully with the time you have left. Frances caught his eye across the dance floor and smiled, that same unguarded, joyful smile that had stopped his heart 6 months ago at a gala. She crooked her finger, beckoning him to join her. Colton walked onto the dance floor, pulled his wife into his arms, and felt complete. Not because the pain was gone, but because he'd learned to carry it while still choosing happiness. That night, after the reception ended and the guests departed, Colton and Frances stood on the plantation's dock watching the sunset paint the Ashley River gold and pink. "What are you thinking?" Frances asked, leaning against him. "That I'm grateful. For you. For this. For the fact that my heart was strong enough to love again." He kissed the top of her head. "And I'm thinking about our future. The life we're building. Maybe kids someday. Definitely more paint-covered Saturdays. Growing brush and soul. Growing old together." "That sounds perfect." "What are you thinking?" Frances tilted her face up to his. "That mama would have loved you. That she would have been so happy I found this. Found you." Her voice caught. "And I'm thinking that loving you is the easiest, scariest, best thing I've ever done." "Same, Mrs. Hicks." She smiled. "I'm keeping Harper professionally. Hyphenating personally." "I know. I love that about you." He turned her in his arms, serious now. "Thank you, Frances. For being patient with my grief. For pushing me to heal. For loving me even when I was still figuring out how to love myself again. Thank you for choosing me. For showing up. For doing the hard work." She touched his chest, right over his heart. No chain. No ring. Just the beating proof that he was alive. "I love you, Colton Hicks. I love you, Frances Harper Hicks." They stood on that dock as the sun disappeared and the stars emerged, two people who'd survived loss and found each other in the aftermath. Two hearts that had learned the hardest lesson, that love, even when it ends, is always worth the risk. Because the alternative, a life half-lived, a heart half-open, that's not living at all. And both of them had chosen to really, truly live. Together. 6 months later. Frances stood in the new Brush and Soul flagship location, a beautiful renovated building on Upper King Street that the National Endowment Grant had funded. 5 classrooms. A gallery space. Room for 200 students. She was setting up for the grand opening when Colton appeared with 2 coffees, just like he had that morning at the coffee shop a year ago. "Peace offering," he said, smiling. "For what?" "For the fact that I'm about to ask you something that might make you cry." Frances took the coffee, suspicious. "What?" Colton led her to the main gallery space. On the wall hung a new painting, one she hadn't authorized. It was Colton's work. The dark ocean water he'd painted a year ago, drowning in darkness. But he'd added to it. Now, emerging from the waves, was a figure reaching toward light breaking through the surface. And beside that figure, another one, reaching back, pulling them up. Below the painting, a plaque, in memory of Victoria Chan and Margaret Harper. The ones who taught us to love. The ones who taught us to live. Frances's hand flew to her mouth. She was crying, happy, healing tears. I wanted to honor them, Colton said quietly. Both of them. The people who shaped us. Who we lost too soon. This space, everything you're building, it's their legacy too. Frances turned to her husband, this man who'd learned to carry grief with grace, and pulled him into her arms. It's perfect. They would have loved it. You think so? I know so. That evening, at the grand opening, Frances stood before a crowd of donors, community members, and students, and told the story of Brush and Soul. How it started with grief. How it grew through hope. How it became something bigger than she'd ever imagined. And when she thanked everyone who'd supported the vision, she looked directly at Colton and said, most of all, thank you to my husband. Who reminded me that creating beauty in the aftermath of loss is the most powerful thing we can do. That art isn't a luxury, it's breathing. And breathing is how we know we're still alive. The crowd applauded. Colton smiled at her, that genuine, full smile that meant he was truly happy. They were both 37 and 34 now. Both survivors of loss. Both choosing, every single day, to build a life defined not by what they'd survived, but by what they were creating. Together. And that was everything. And that's how Colton Hicks, the billionaire CEO who thought he'd never love again, found his heart completely full for the first time. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about finding someone perfect, they're about finding someone worth healing for. Someone who reminds you that choosing to live again isn't betraying the past, it's honoring it. If Colton and Frances's journey touched your heart today, do me a favor, hit that like button right now. Let me know this story resonated with you. And if you believe in second chances, in love after loss, in finding light even in the darkest waters, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Because every week, I bring you stories about real people finding extraordinary love when they least expect it. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to choose between holding on to the past or embracing a new future? What would you have done in Colton's shoes? I read every single comment, and I love hearing your stories. Thank you so much for spending the last hour with me. For investing in Colton and Frances's journey. For believing that no matter how much we've lost, our hearts are strong enough to love again. Remember, it's never too late for a new beginning. It's never too late to choose joy. And it's never too late to let love in. Until next time, keep believing in love. The end.